Hey guys, Mark here, coming to you from my beautiful backyard in Folsom, California. I'm sure many of you are aware that we're having a solar eclipse happening from coast to coast on the continental United States. If you're lucky enough to live in the United States, you'll each be able to witness a portion, if not complete totality, depending upon where you live. Obviously, you may have seen the swipe across the United States from Oregon all the way down to South Carolina. If you are lucky enough to live in that path or are wandering to that path, you'll get totality, which means the sun is going to be blocked out completely and it'll turn into almost nighttime in the region where you are in that area. But here in Northern California, we're only going to get about 80% of it where I'm standing right here. It's about 78-80%, which means we're still going to be able to see a lot of the moon passing in front of the sun itself. We're not going to get complete darkness, but we still will be able to witness a good portion of that eclipse. Now, I know many of you were wanting to attempt to photograph it. Well, here's my setup, and let me give you a few tricks on how you too can photograph the solar eclipse coming up. Alright, let's bring you in a little closer to my setup here. What I've got right now is I have my 100 to 400 lens, and I put my doubler extension on it, which gives me 800 millimeters to view the sun through this lens. This is off of my 5D Mark IV. So I have a full frame sensor. For those of you that have crop sensors, will actually get even closer with the lens that you're using. So here we have it set up. So you don't actually have to have a doubler, you don't actually have to have 400 millimeter lens. You can actually still photograph this with whatever lens you have. Just want to zoom in as far as you possibly can. If you got a 70 to 200, use the 200. Your closeness is obviously what you're not going to get too close to the sun, but you're still, with the settings that I'm going to give you, be able to actually photograph the eclipse where it's actually noticeable. Now, right now I have it on a green square. Many of you probably, green square is the auto mode. Many of you probably use the auto mode. I'm going to pull you out of that, especially for this. I can talk to you about time value versus aperture value, but what we're going to do is we're going to actually turn this over to manual mode. So I know the big M, that might scare some of you, but this is where you have full control of your camera, and it will give you the best results for when we're shooting the eclipse. So right now, as you can see, I've got it pointed in the sun in a general direction. If any of you have a live mode on your camera, you want to go ahead and enable that, and that will allow you to start seeing the sun through your lens. I've already got this situated in the settings that I want. If I pull this out of live mode, you can probably start seeing the settings that I have in the manual mode. Now, manual, you'll see the 1 to 8,000. 1/8000, that is your shutter speed. Shutter speed, you want to be as quick as possible. That will allow for the least amount of light. What we're going to try to do is make the sky dark so that you can actually see the outline of the sun rather than a big white glowing ball up there. So the 8,000 is the fastest. You want to set your speed of your camera to the fastest shutter speed possible through the manual mode. Now next you'll see my f-stop. My f-stop is at 81. That's pretty nice with this lens and with the doubler that I have on top of it. That allows me to get to an f-stop 20 or 81. Now f-stop is the amount of light that can come through your lens. So if you look at the aperture as a circle, when you have a small number like 5.6 or even 2.8 or 1.4, if you're lucky to have those lenses, that opens up the eye of your lens very, very big. But here again, we're trying to make the sky go black, so we want to actually squeeze that down to a tiny, tiny, tiny circle. And the bigger your f number or your f-stop, the smaller that little hole is going to be. So you've seen people put pinholes in pieces of paper and see the the solar eclipse via the pinhole through the paper on the ground or on a sheet of paper or another sheet of paper. That tiny pinhole is what allows you to see the detail of the solar eclipse. That's essentially what we're doing with our cameras. We're making the tiny hole through our lenses, and then we're also doing a fast shutter speed to catch as little of that light as possible. My third setting is the ISO setting. So the ISO setting is set to 100, and you want that to be as small in numbers as possible as well. If you've got a camera that allows you to go to ISO 50, do it. ISO is a light sensitivity of your sensor. It kind of emulates what film used to be like back in the day. It's a sensitivity setting, so if you have a high ISO, you're gonna be very sensitive to any amount of light coming through and hitting the sensor. With that said, you're also picking up a lot of grain in your images. A lot of noise is what photographers call it. A lot of artifacts in there that you really don't want to see. So you want your ISO to be small. You want your f-stop to be the large number, the largest you can get, and you want your shutter speed to be as fast as you possibly can get it. And when you get to those settings, and if you get into live mode, you can see the sun is actually moving on us as it's cruising across the sky. So you'll actually need to make some setting adjustments as you are watching the solar eclipse. Right now you can actually see that I've got it fairly well centered. And then at this point, when you get everything stabilized, you also want to try to put it on a tripod, because when you're shooting this far of reach, like 800 millimeters, any little hand movement is going to be jittery. So you want to get it on a tripod, and that also means that you want to see if you get a remote switch or something. So when everything is settled down, then you want to just go ahead and hit that remote switch. Now if you don't have a remote switch, which you can hear now right now beeping, is you can also set your camera to the 10-second timer, and that will make sure that your camera is not moving at the time the picture gets taken. Alright, one other thing that we need to deal with is focus. And if you see on my screen, it actually has MF, and that MF means manual focus. What I have done is I've come up here and manually set my focus to infinity. And depending upon how far away, obviously the sun is as far as you can possibly get in this kind of scenario. Sometimes you want to push it on the line, as you can see right there, or push it all the way to infinity. I actually made some test shots, and pushing it all the way to infinity was actually the best results. It gives me the crispest edge around the sun. Once I have that set, you want to go ahead and make sure your lens is in manual focus. Stabilizer too is another thing. Sometimes your stabilizer motor will be running at the time that you're trying to take a picture. You can actually set that to off if you want, because you already got it on a tripod. You're not going to need to worry about auto image stabilization on your lens. So when you're doing any kind of long-term exposure especially, you want to make sure that that stabilizer is off, because if it's spinning on your tripod, it'll actually create some vibrations, and your images will not come out very clear. If you are lucky enough though to have a doubler, I'm going to go ahead and turn this on. I'm going to go into live mode here, and you notice that the sun is moving once again. So I'm going to make some adjustments, get that sun back in the frame here, and go from there. Now I noticed too that on the Mark IV, the 5D, you don't have autofocus when you're actually pushing on the button to focus on the whatever is in the subject in your lens. But if you go into live mode, you can actually focus if it possibly can. Sometimes you can get it to focus on the sun, and it'll actually tune right in to where you want it to be. If it turns green, that's a beautiful thing about this touchscreen as well, is when you touch it, and if it turns green, it'll actually take the picture for you. But anyways, I'm not getting it to focus right now, and you can see that my focal point is moved way off. So I'm going to move that way back over here to infinity again, turn it to manual focus, and then let me take this out so that now that I have my remote switch, I can come down here and turn off my timer, so it's just a single shot mode. Last setting in there that I want to talk about, I guess you can say your auto white balance can be set to auto, or your white balance to auto. Really your exposure adjustment or evaluation meter can be set that way. But RAW is another thing that you want to start shooting in. Don't shoot in JPEG unless you have the option of a JPEG with RAW. I know friends that are actually doing JPEGs with RAW, and they get some really clean JPEGs right out of the camera. But if you're not shooting RAW, you should, because in post-processing that gives you a whole lot more capabilities of cleaning your images and adjusting them after the fact. Now also you can see for lining up the sun, you don't want to stare at the sun obviously through your viewfinder. You want to actually try to get it in that general direction and then turn on your live mode. You can actually turn on your live mode and have your lens, if I can loosen it up with one hand, doesn't seem like I can, but hang on, let me pull this down. This allows you, in the live mode, you can find the sun where it is, kind of get it centered first, and then you can zoom all the way out to get it centered. So part of the process of getting the sun in your viewfinder, do not look through the viewfinder to get your sun. Even a little bit of that in your eye is not good for you. Anyways, this is how I've got it all set up. We're ready to take some test shots and see what we come up with. This process obviously is not just for the solar eclipse that that we're going to be viewing on what is it, August 21st, 2017. But this is also how you can photograph solar events of any sort, or just photographing the sun in general. The last thing I'll tell you about too is that I did not plan for this accordingly well enough in advance. I was a little late in deciding whether or not I wanted to actually photograph the eclipse, but I'm seeing so many other people do it, and I said, well, what the heck, I'll go in for it. But I did not grab a filter. So one of the things that you can do is put a filter, or it's called either a neutral density filter on the end of your lens that will really limit the amount of light that comes in. That'll also give you more clarity of the sun as it's going across the sky. You want that nice sharp edges of the sun so that you can really see the sharp edges of the moon when they come by. So I don't have a neutral density filter for this. I bought one, found out it was garbage, and I'm returning it. So I went back to the other filters that I did when the solar eclipse happened in 2012. I put my circular polarizer filters on, and they kind of do a little bit of the same thing if you get them all lined up. And I have 3 of them, so what I did is I stacked all 3 of them. A lot of times if you stack filters, you don't get the clarity or the quality that you would without stacking filters. But if you're out shooting wildlife or something, you don't want to do this. But for the solar eclipse, this will be totally fine, because you're not getting true clear edges anyways. I know some of you out there that have 1200 millimeter lenses, and they have these fantastic neutral density filters on them, and some of them are even homemade. you're going to get better quality than the rest of us. But this is how I've got mine set up. I've got 3 circular polarizers. I've had them adjusted individually so they're at the darkest sensing portion all the way through, and it actually works pretty well. And you'll end up seeing some of the pictures I get from this setup when it's all complete. Now, if you are lucky enough to have a camera that has Wi-Fi built into it, like the Canon 5D Mark IV, the beauty of having Wi-Fi is that you can actually connect it to your iPhone or to your iPad or your computer, or other connection points. I have it actually set up on my iPad right now, and this gives me a live view of what I'm seeing through the viewfinder over there with the camera. So from here I can show you a few things of how we can actually control this shoot. If I come over here and click on my manual shutter speed, I can actually move the shutter speed over to actually 0, and you can see that's what you would normally get a picture of through your normal camera if you're in the auto mode. So as you move this shutter speed down, you can see a little bit of halos around there. So I can adjust this camera so that you can see a bit of the halos. And the faster you make this shutter speed, the more clarity you're going to get on the sun itself. Same thing with the f-stop. If we come over here to f-stop, right now I'm at f-stop 81, but if I move the slider way back over, you're going to start getting those halos again around the sun. So again, this puts to my point of why we want to have the tiniest little pinhole of the f-stop at the highest number, and you want to make sure that your shutter speed is as fast as possible. Again, my ISO is set to 100. I don't have the ability to go anything lower other than auto. If I bring in the light sensitivity over here, you will see that we're going to start getting halos again around the sun. So that's why we want to make sure that we are at the smallest number for ISO. And so now with this, it's beautiful because I can sit here at my desk, my table, my patio, and I can just take pictures all day long just by pushing the button here. Because the camera is set up on a tripod, it's not moving, there's no vibration whatsoever, it's in live mode, so it's not actually clacking too much of the mirror. When it takes the picture, they're going to be pretty clear and concise. And then from there you can come back out, look at the images that are on the camera, and you can select these images, and when they actually come back into focus, you'll be able to see clearly what's happening with the eclipse. Pretty fun stuff, depending upon the camera that you have and the equipment that you have. I have some friends out there that have far more advanced equipment than I am, and they're probably laughing at me right now at my little video of how to photograph the solar eclipse. But I've done this a few times, and I know there's a lot of people that have had questions on how to do it, and so this is my little video on making sure that you too can photograph the solar eclipse with the cameras that you have. It's up in the air of whether or not I'm going to be here in Folsom, or if I am mobile. I'm going mobile to catch this, maybe in more totality. I even have friends that are going to be shooting this from the air. You know who you are. That's going to be killer. I'm a little envious of that. But who knows? I'm going to see if I can change my latitude a little bit before this time tomorrow. Anyways, if you have any questions, shoot them my way, email them, put them in the messages, whatever you want to do. If there's something I missed, by all means, hit me up. Anyways, get out there, shoot the sun. Off for now. See ya.